Hi guys, and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I will share with you the best templates you can use in Hearts of Iron 4 in 2025. But we're actually going to do more than that. We're also going to discuss the best combat widths and the most important stats you want on your divisions. If that sounds interesting, then this is the right video for you. And if you have been enjoying the content I make, please do not forget to support the channel by liking the video, subscribing, and leaving me a comment. It really helps. Now, before we start, let me say a couple of things very quickly. Number one, these are single-player oriented templates. You can find a dedicated video for multiplayer templates in the description of this video. Number two, the keyword for templates in 2025 is flexibility. The state of the game is such that a large variety of templates can actually work well as long as you use them well. So what really matters rather than the template itself is finding something that works well in your scenario and for you as a player, for your playstyle. So my advice for you would be to try and have an open mind when it comes to templates. That being said, let's start by taking a look at combat widths to see what we should aim for when designing our templates. Now, if you just want to see the templates, feel free to skip ahead. You can use the chapters down below, and you can also find a brief recap of all templates at the end of this video. Now, to discuss combat widths, we are going to use this amazing graph. Now, this is not something I made. I found it on Reddit, so all credits to the author. I will also include a link to the original post in the description. So, what is the combat width and why does it matter? Now, to keep it simple, the combat width is the space occupied by your divisions on the battlefield. Now, as you can see up here, each terrain in the game has a specific width. And if your divisions are not using the entire space, then you are wasting potential. And if your divisions are above the space of the terrain, then you will incur in some penalties. So ideally, you would always want to match perfectly the width of the terrain in which you're fighting. However, things are a bit more complicated than that. That would not be very practical, as you generally want a balanced template that can fight effectively on a variety of terrains, not just on one. And here is where this graph comes into play, as it quickly shows us what widths are best, considering the average penalties per number of attacking directions, attacking divisions, as well as the various terrains. Now, to keep it short and simple, what we are looking at here is this column here to the right, and what we want are blue numbers, what we do not want are red numbers. Now, these numbers represent the average penalties for your divisions, so of course the lower they are, the better. And if you look at it here, the lowest possible one would be 15. As you can see, this 0.42 average penalty is the lowest on the entire graph. But this does not mean that 15 is the best width in the game. For example, larger widths tend to have higher penalties, but they also have much better stats. So as long as we keep these penalties within a reasonable number, we are fine. Basically, anything that is not red in here will work alright. Okay, that being said, let's actually start looking at some templates. And as we do so, I will also mention the most important stats we are looking for. Okay, so the first template I have for you today is my default defensive one. Now, the most important stats here are actually the production cost and the manpower requirement, as we want this template to be as cheap as possible, in order to easily and quickly deploy them and use them to protect our fronts. Now, in terms of width, both 10 and 12 are alright, will work well. I often keep the starting width of the country I'm playing with. Although 12 can also be good for some limited offensive actions, especially in low supply terrains, as the supply use of this template is fairly low. In terms of support companies, if you want to keep it as cheap as possible, you can simply stick to the engineer company. But support artillery is always very good, even defensively, and the anti-air support company will add some piercing to the template, which is very good, but especially it's very important if you cannot achieve the air superiority. Now, you could actually even turn this into a very good offensive template if you pick the superior firepower doctrine, especially the right branch here, which boosts support companies. And if you add some more offensive-oriented support companies, such as the rocket artillery company. Now, as we just mentioned, it is totally possible to use infantry-only templates to successfully push your opponents. So this very next template that I'm going to share with you is a very flexible one. This is also the starting template for some of the important countries in the game, such as Germany. You could also make a 14 width version by just removing a few battalions, a couple of battalions, if you cannot afford an 18 width one. Of course, you can also further increase the width by adding more infantry battalions and go for a full infantry template. Now, this works particularly well with the mass mobilization doctrines, especially the one that reduces the infantry combat width. One thing though is, if you plan to use this template or the previous one offensively, I would highly recommend adding a field hospital at the very least, or your manpower will disappear very quickly. Now personally I tend to use this template only defensively, a bit like an upgraded version of the previous one. Alright, next let's start talking about some more offensive oriented templates. In addition to increasing the amount of battalions in your template, to further boost the offensive potential of your infantry, you have a few options. And one of them is adding some line artillery. Now, there is currently a widespread myth saying that line artillery is bad and you should not use it. While there are some reasons behind this argument, I mostly disagree, and I dedicated a video to this topic sharing my test results. Regardless, I find this template to be incredibly effective, so you should give it a try. Here you actually have a couple of options, both in terms of width and in terms of the balance between infantry battalions and artillery battalions. So if you cannot afford a 30 width template, you can make a 15 width one instead. It would look like this and it would be much cheaper. Also, remember when we said that 15 is the best width in terms of average penalties? Well, here you go. Another thing you could do here is you could decrease the infantry battalions and you could increase the artillery battalions instead, for something like this. This will further boost our soft attack, which is the most important offensive stat in single player. And it will also reduce the manpower requirements. At the same time, however, it does increase the production cost and it decreases most other stats. So which variant should you use? Well, that depends on you and on the situation. If you have limited manpower and industry, then you can go for the 15 width version. If you have a good industry but limited manpower, then this 30 width artillery heavy one can be a good solution. Otherwise, you can simply stick to this very balanced original one. Now, in terms of support companies for all of our offensive templates, we are going to use the Assault Engineer company, and you can see the reason very well down there. Those terrain bonuses are insane. This is unlocked through a land special project, but if you do not have access to it, you can just stick to the regular engineer company and it will be fine. Now, we also want to have a field hospital, as usual, on infantry offensive divisions, otherwise manpower will suffer greatly. As for the last slot, this one is more or less free. I like recon, but you can use something else. For example, you could use a medium flame tank company for even more terrain bonuses. Alright, next, another fantastic option you have to greatly boost the offensive potential of your infantry is to add some tank battalions. Tanks are more expensive than line artillery, they require additional researches, they use fuel, and they consume more supplies, so they are not always the best choice. But when you can afford them, they will massively boost the stats of your infantry. Now, specifically, they offer three very important advantages. Now, first of all, tank battalions only take 2 width per battalion, while artillery takes 3, meaning you can fit more tank battalions into the same width. Number 2, they offer significantly more soft attack and especially breakthrough compared to line artillery, and both are very important offensive stats. Number 3, also very important, they increase the hardness of your division and they increase the armor, the average armor of your division, resulting in much less damage taken. With this template you take virtually no casualties, which is why in terms of support companies we can give up on the field hospital, it's no longer needed, and we can use a logistics company instead to keep the supply use under control. Now, by the way, when talking about logistics company and field hospital, if you have access to helicopters, of course you can use the helicopter version, which is usually a bit better, but if you don't have access to them, that's totally fine, it's not mandatory at all. Now, on this template, we absolutely want the medium flame tank company to boost further the terrain buffs. Alright, next it's time for some of the heavy stuff. A mix of motorized infantry and medium tanks will offer the best possible results when on the offense. This template has absolutely insane soft attack and insane breakthrough. The breakthrough is actually even a bit too much, but this is with all technologies unlocked, so that's why. Now, this together with high hardness and armor will make this template completely unstoppable. Now, you will not only destroy enemy divisions, you will also do it incredibly fast, as we have twice the speed of infantry. and without any casualties. Now in this case we are using a Motorized recon company instead of anti-air, assuming that if you have the industry to produce this monster, then you will probably also be able to compete for the air superiority. But if that's not the case, feel free to replace Motorized or one of the other companies with anti-air. Another thing you can do here to make this template a little bit cheaper and still use a good combat with is you can remove 2 tank battalions and you can add a motorized artillery instead. And the main advantage here is you keep pretty good stats and you make the template a lot cheaper, especially in terms of tanks. So if you cannot produce enough tanks, you can start with this and then you can later on upgrade to this one. Another thing you absolutely want to do later in the game is you want to replace your motorized infantry with mechanized infantry. Mechanized infantry has overall better stats, more breakthrough, more HP, and it will increase the hardness of your division, meaning you take even less casualties. So you want one by one to replace all of these motorized with mechanized later in the game. Now the next template is a very easy one. This is a motorized version of our default infantry template, and the only purpose for this template is to follow our tanks around. This will offer a first line of defense while the regular infantry is catching up. And the reason for that is that armored divisions are faster than regular infantry, so when pushing with them, if you're not careful, you can create some gaps into your front that the AI can take advantage of. So with this template you have a first line of defense, an easy one. You can also remove anti-air and artillery to keep it as cheap as possible, just to protect the front while infantry is arriving. You could also use them since they are very fast to rush victory points, but it is not the main purpose of this division. Now next we have a series of Mountaineers templates, starting with this one. With the new Special Forces doctrines, Mountaineers can become incredibly powerful. So much that a Mountaineers only template like this one can work amazingly. Now, not only they have overall great stats, but they have absolutely insane terrain bonuses, and as you can see here, not only in the mountains, they actually have insane terrain bonuses in a large variety of terrains, almost all of them. The reason you see a variety of widths up here is that 25 would be the ideal width to have in the mountains, but as we mentioned, this template is very good in so many terrains that it would be a waste to make it only for the mountains. In the mountains it's already good, so you can increase the width to 30 or 32.2 by picking the Special Forces doctrine that decreases the width of Mountaineers, this one, which is usually the meta one. So with this one you can fit even more Mountaineers in here and you can reach a width of 32.2. So 25, 30, 32, all of these widths will be incredibly good with this template. Now the main limitation when it comes to Mountaineers or Special Forces in general is the Special Forces cap. If you do not abuse game mechanics, it's very difficult to make a large amount of these divisions. So what you can do instead is you can mix your Mountaineers with line artillery or tanks, like we did previously. So this first version that I'm offering you here is exactly the same as our infantry, but with Mountaineers instead. Mountaineers offer better stats than regular infantry, and they compensate for the usual maluses that artillery gets in several terrains thanks to their bonuses. So you still get amazing bonuses in most terrains, and you get the extra soft attack from line artillery, but especially you consume less of your Special Forces cap. Now, a thing that is important to remember with Mountaineers is you always want the Rangers support company. This is a special support company unlocked with the special doctrines, as they give particularly good bonuses to Mountaineers. Now, these also insanely boost the line artillery soft attack, as you can see, plus 20%. So another good option here is going all the way up to 36 with by adding 2 more line artillery battalions. As you can see, the soft attack of this template compared to the cost of this template is absolutely insane. This can compete with tanks, with the added advantage of having insane terrain bonuses. Now, of course, on this template we want a flame tank to even further boost those terrain bonuses. And of course, as we did for infantry, Mountaineers will also work very well with tank battalions. Tank battalions will boost the soft attack, the hardness, the armor, so they will preserve the manpower and the experience on your template. You may have noticed that we didn't have a field hospital on this template, so adding some tanks can help under that point of view. Of course, the other option would be if you do have green air, you may not need the anti-air support company, you can use a field hospital instead. Maybe not on this template, but on the regular one or on the artillery version. Now we're almost done, a couple more templates, and we remain in the topic of special forces, as the next one is a very basic Marines template. This is very similar to our default infantry, so the same type of widths will work for it. You can go for 18, 14, 12, or even just 10, and it will work fine. Of course, we are using Pioneers, which is a special forces support company, to further boost the amphibious attack. Look at that, plus 75%, that's quite insane. You can decide on the width also based on the terrain in which you're fighting. If you're island hopping in the Pacific, small islands, no supplies, well then probably the smallest width here will work particularly well. If you're going for a D-Day invasion or invading the UK, then of course you want a larger width to make sure you disembark successfully. Personally, I do not find Marines to be particularly worth it, as at least in single player you can easily use other special forces. Like the Mountaineers we just checked, they also have good bonuses for naval invasions. And even regular infantry or even tanks, despite the maluses, are very good at disembarking, and then they are incredibly fast at conquering the countries you are invading. Even the new buffed UK can be invaded very easily with my armored template and then completely destroyed. Now, the very last template I have for you today is a Paratroopers template. That's another one I very rarely use. And again, here you can opt for different widths. Of course, this is not meant to be used for paratrooper cheesing the eye, otherwise you can just go for the smallest one. This is meant to be used for actual paratrooping. And of course, the larger the width, the better the stats. In this case, we are also adding some support companies in addition to the usual ones. We are using the airborne light armor. This is particularly important because, at least with these light tanks, which you wouldn't be able to add normally as battalions, you can boost a little bit the stats, the armor of your paratroopers, which otherwise are not great. And then the field hospital, because the field hospital has a bonus, as you can see there, to recovery rate for paratroopers. Again, I don't use paratroopers much, but I wanted to share a template with you. Now, one question you might have is what about these tank designs, the light tank design, the tank designs that you used for this armored template? Well, those will be covered in a separate video. This video is already quite long, but make sure to check out the dedicated video for the best tank designs. I will include, of course, a link down in the description. Okay guys, and that's really all for today. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please do not forget to support the channel by liking the video, subscribing, and leaving me a comment. It's very important. And also, please make sure to let me know in the comments what you thought about these templates and if you have any suggestions for further improvements. Other than that, if you stayed with me until now, thank you for watching, and I will see you guys very soon in the next video. Bye bye!